It's more than just a living, y'all. Hell, it's our way of life. We're the last of the cowboys, the giddy up gone boys. 18 wheels on the concrete, it's a slow and dying breed, rolling like Jesse James, a modern day outlaw game. If you're out here riding with me, come on back and make some noise. We're the last of the cowboys.
Welcome back to Merging Lanes, the podcast where we have conversations with passionate people in the trucking industry. My name is Dr. Mark Manera. I am the founder and CEO of the Trucking Fitness Company, and I have the great honor of having a co-host, Mark Colson, who is the president and CEO of the Alabama Trucking Association with me. Colson, how's it going?
Doing great, man. I'm excited about today. We're going to have some energy on this call. We like to bring people with energy. We got a friend with some energy, but I know you've had what's new in the Trucking Fitness Company. I know you've been through a few evolutions over the past 6 months. So what's happening there?
Yeah. So, well, I think last time we spoke, I was in the process of, I just recently brought on a business partner, and Ron and I, it's been great. Ron is what I needed. And he brings the expertise of the supply chain and the experience too. And I think that it's really exciting. And we just built out a ton of content for office workers, maintenance workers, and people outside of drivers. I spent the first year and a half really nailing down the fitness for drivers. And now when we're going towards some of these enterprise and trucking companies, we want to, help the whole supply chain live a healthier life. And so we want to have a solution for everyone. And so that's really exciting. But other than that,
our guest today is going to be in that same vein. We found ourselves in a few hotel gyms before on some of the events we've had to travel to. And he's a guy, he and I both need a more regular workout routine with our jobs, but he's a supporter of a healthy and fit lifestyle. But, we just all celebrated Easter, and that, it made me think, I think Easter now, being still a relatively new parent, and Paul is a veteran parent on this, so we can talk about kids too. But I learned my daughter came home. She goes to a church school, and she's 3, and she was saying, Jesus died on the cross for our sins, and I was like, whoa. I mean, I felt like proud as a parent, but also fair. Like, I didn't teach her that. Like, well, and so I said, okay, well, what happened on Easter? I said, and she was like, she looked at me. I said, what did Jesus do on Easter? And then she looked at me. She said, he brings us candy. And, and I'm like feeling like a complete failure as a parent. So I think Easter is also, it's a wonderful time with family, a wonderful time to remember the blessings in life and the hope. But also as a parent, I think it's also I thought about the shortcomings, though that she did redeem herself. We were traveling to see family that afternoon, and out of nowhere in the back of the car, she started singing, Low in the Gravy Lay, which most people know is Up from the Grave He Arose, and just on her own struck out into that song. So, I mean, I did feel a little bit better as a parent.
I saw that on Facebook. It was too cute.
And hey, Mark, I love that you said redemption, right? Because that's what it's all about. I mean, there's always an opportunity for us to get better. And, I love the idea of, getting better in terms of health and fitness, because you're 100% right. That's something that, not just our drivers, but everyone needs. And I mean, for me, at this point in my life, it's more about my mental health than physical, because if I don't go and work out, if I'm not in the gym sometime during the day, the people around me are saying, will you please go to the gym?
That was good, especially our families. But that leads us in. So I'm super excited about having Paul Enos on today. And for those who don't know Paul, there's not many who don't. He is the president and CEO of the Nevada Trucking Association, and has been so since 2006. And personally, Paul and his wife Sarah and daughter Nora and son Ben, I've gotten to spend a good amount of time. We actually drove ATVs out in the wilderness of Wyoming together. You do that, you learn a lot about people. So we have traveled the country together. But Paul also has a distinct honor of serving as the national chairperson of our trucking federation of all the 50 states. We call it the Trucking Association Executive Council. And so Paul is in the role as chair this year of all 50 states in the federation. So that's a distinct honor, I know, for Paul in our business. I mean, that's when you're looked at by your colleagues to serve in that capacity, it's a big deal. But Paul, thank you for being on with us today. I wanted to start with something fun, because we've gotten to travel so much. I do know that one of your goals in life is to visit all 50 states. and I know that you're almost there. So I'm curious of what states you have left. And also, I mean, everybody knows you because you're the guy, when you walk in a room, you refer to everyone by their state nickname. So in this case,
Yellowhammer State, which is one of my absolute favorite state nicknames that there is. So no, that's great. So I still have the Peace Garden State, which is North Dakota. I have the Badger State, Wisconsin. I have, and our colleague from Minnesota hates it when I refer to it as the Gopher State, which it is. You know, also you can say, hey, land of 10,000 lakes. I've got the Hawkeye State and the Sunflower State. So Iowa and Kansas. And the goal is 50 states by 50. So I've got 3.5 more years.
Oh, you're going to nail it. You're going to nail it.
Well, that's
we got the Show Me State on here too. So.
Well, and that's like the next level up, because a lot of people, you know, everyone's like, oh, I know the state capitals, but I don't think there's too many people who know all the state nicknames. So that's, I give you props for that.
And he uses them. He uses them all.
That's a misspent 4th grade, right? With the Pumpkin Wagnalls, dictionary, right?
Well, Paul, I've appreciated, you know, the opportunity over the past 3 years to really get to know you better and admire you. And you've been in this role with the Nevada Trucking Association.
My friend, they're very, very blessed to have you in Alabama. And, you know, the neat thing about this federation, Mark, is you can say that about, you know, every one of our colleagues. You know, we all do something different, but, you know, what an amazing group of people. And I absolutely love the federation, you know, being able to pick up the phone and get information, what's going on in any of the states around the country. That is an absolute blessing that we have in these gigs.
But it's a powerful force, and not only is it fun and they become like family, but it's a tremendous resource, and it makes the industry stronger. We're going to talk a little bit more about the federation, but Paul, you've been there for 16 years. You've seen the industry for that amount of time. Well, just quickly, how'd you get into the truck? It's always interesting to find out how all of our interesting God led us to the path to be in the trucking world. But then in those 16 years, what have you seen change culturally and otherwise?
Sure. So, you know, getting into the trucking industry, I started as a lobbyist. You know, I always loved politics. I wanted to lobby. You know, if I had to do it over again, maybe I would have learned to play the guitar. I mean, you have
the hair for it. I mean, you got the look.
I'm working on it, buddy. But it's funny. My grandpa was actually a truck driver, drove, you know, in the regulated days for PIE. I actually, you know, he left the trucking industry to become a cop, but because he was a cop didn't mean he didn't have larceny in his heart, because this was his going away present from the trucking industry, the hood ornament off his Mack truck, the Mack Bulldog that he swiped on his last day, which now sits on my desk. But, you know, I came to the trucking industry after lobbying for different business groups, different private industries. I've always loved politics, and I feel blessed every day. This is one of the easiest industries to represent, not because our issues aren't complicated, because they definitely are, and they are extremely broad. But what makes it easy is the great people that are a part of this industry. We have, you know, absolutely phenomenal business folks. The drivers are some of the most down-to-earth, patriotic people that you will ever meet. Just great people. And I feel blessed every day to be able to represent this industry.
So, you know,
right. What have we seen change? Boy, I mean, it's, you know, I will tell you, over the last 16 years, there have been a lot of changes, although it feels like there's been a tremendous amount of changes in the last 2. Of course, the visibility of truck drivers, you know, in a positive light is skyrocketed. You know, unfortunately, it only took a global pandemic to make that happen. And, you know, when you have politicians, you know, like in Canada or in the United States who, you know, end up doing stupid things, our folks tend to get recognized a little bit more. So, I mean, I think that's a positive. But I mean, if you look at, you know, kind of those core things in our industry, you know, which is essentiality, which I think everybody today is aware of, the essentiality of trucks. You know, the safety side. Safety is something that is very important. And, you know, we as an industry have become tremendously safer over my tenure here, you know, not just with training, not just because we have the best drivers out there on the road, but also the technology that is being put into trucks that can react before a driver can, you know, whether it's your forward collision mitigation systems, anti-rollover systems, All of those driver assisted technologies that are going into the truck make us a safer industry. And then, of course, the sustainability piece. When I came into this industry, there was a big debate over moving from a conventional diesel fuel to ultra low sulfur diesel. And we saw a little bit of a challenge there. And then you had things like the particulate matter filter that was going into trucks, and that was causing some issues. And then just kind of that engine migration. I think our OEMs have figured how that stuff how that stuff works very well today. It was a little bit of a challenge early on, but when you just look at the technology that goes into the trucks that makes it safer, that makes it cleaner, I think those are some of the biggest changes that we've seen. Another change that we've seen in this industry is, on the broker side, there used to be a great amount of tension between trucking companies and brokers. And so many trucking companies today are now also in the broker business, as a way to offload some of the freight that may not make sense to them. And it's becoming a huge part of what they do. So, I think that's just another change operationally that we're seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we always hear, I think nationwide trucking problems that the whole country's facing. And I always thought it was interesting whenever Colson brought up some of the Alabama specific problems that they're dealing with. What are a couple of Nevada trucking specific things that you're trying to figure out, or that are maybe not keeping you up at night, but giving you some headaches throughout the day?
Sure. Hey, it goes right here in Northern Nevada, we are on Interstate 80. And I think one of the hardest places to drive a truck is over Donner Summit. I don't know if you guys know about the Donner Party in the South, but, it's a legend out here in the West where you had this party of pioneers that got stuck up in the mountains in the 1840s, and they resorted to cannibalism. Well, during the wintertime, our trucks have to go over that pass every day to go into the Bay Area, into the Port of Oakland. And chaining up on Donner Pass is probably one of the most difficult places in the country for truck drivers to drive. We have seen that road shut down quite a bit over this last year. I think it was shut down for 5 days over the Christmas holiday. So you start to see things in stores get a little more sparse. You don't have the fresh vegetables that you normally have. So, that's, one of those Nevada specific problems. One of the issues that we have, out here in the Libertine West, that you don't quite have in the South yet, Mark, is the legalization of marijuana. That has made it a lot tougher for our folks to go out there and find that pool of new drivers to come in, because, marijuana is kind of this ubiquitous thing out here in the West. You go to a party and, people, anybody over 60, they're talking about what they're using, for their aches and pains, and, what they're getting at the dispensary. And, that's an issue that I think is becoming a lot more visible nationwide as we're seeing marijuana legalized throughout the country. We need help from the federal government on this. This is an area where we need to do a much better job of determining impairment as opposed to usage. I think about what would happen if you told a truck driver they couldn't drink beer. We'd have a lot fewer truck drivers. Yeah. And, marijuana is getting to that point. The last thing any of us want to see is somebody who is impaired, inebriated behind an 80,000 pound or heavier truck. But I think we could do a better job in determining, usage versus impairment. So, that's something that we're working on in Nevada, and, I think is going to become more of a nationwide issue, especially if we do see movement on the feds to legalize marijuana.
Well, Paul, that leads us right into when I first started in this job, you were leading a coalition, basically coalition of the state federations and the national groups on marijuana policy, really not to derive a particular solution, but just to put the facts on the table. And I remember that was some of our first meetings that we had. You don't have to get in the weeds on you don't have to get in the weeds on marijuana.
I was love it.
But it leads us into like the role of the federation and how, you know, each state is its own incubator for good things and potentially bad things, especially when you involve state legislatures and regulatory bodies at the state and local levels, not to mention the federal government. So talk a little bit about how, you know, your ascension to the leading the federation, the way it's operating today, and why you think it's so important for the trucking industry in America and in each of our states.
Well, hey, real quick, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our good mutual friend and current chair of the American Trucking Association, your fellow Yellowhammer State member, Harold Summerford. He co-chaired that task force along with me, and I think we did come up with some good solutions, which, you know, for me, it happened because we had legislation here at the state level to say you couldn't fire somebody, or sorry, you couldn't not hire somebody because they had failed a drug test. So, you know, we have issues like this come up in states all of the time. I feel very blessed to have 49 other folks that I can pick up the phone and call who have been through those same issues, who can kind of help guide us through. Unfortunately, sometimes we end up on the bleeding edge, right? I think our friends in California, you know, in terms of the environmental issues and a lot of the labor issues, you know, they're on the bleeding edge of a lot of those things. And of course, we have Washington and Oregon where they're, you know, trying to ban the sales of diesel fuel, you know, by 2025 or 2030, which, you know, is a challenge as well. But, you know, I think that the neat thing about the Federation is really having those issues all brought to one place from around the country, so we can talk them through, so we can say, hey, what works, what doesn't work, and find that path forward that does make it easier for our members, because ultimately that's what we're doing here. We're trying to make it easier for our members, you know, of all sizes. The neat thing about the state trucking associations is most of our members are very small trucking companies. I've got the big guys too. We've all got the biggest guys in the world in our associations, but we are, for the most part, representing small businesses, whether it's your one truck operator. The average size trucking company has 6 trucks. So, you know, that's really where in the state side, our bread and butter is, and where, you know, who I'm thinking about when I'm out there advocating for folks. I love our big guys, but they don't need me as much as our small guys do. So, you know, that really is something I am thinking about, because a piece of legislation, it could have a negative impact on one of the bigger companies, but it could absolutely decimate some of the smaller companies. And, you know, we're seeing that happen, you know, unfortunately, with insurance rates going up. They're going up because the trucking industry has been the target from the trial lawyers for a lot of these lawsuits. We've seen nuclear verdicts increase by almost 1,000% over the last dozen years. So, you know, those are things that I'm watching and think about. And, you know, those are some of the issues that keep me up at night. And I know they're keeping my members up at night as well, especially if they have trucks on the road.
Well, and that's, you know, I thought about it too. And that one thing I think the extreme value is the consensus building, right? I mean, because like we have these incubators, but everyone's autonomous. So they have their own. You might not be able to agree on all of the topics, even with like national groups. Our friends at the American Trucking Association, which are great partners and are doing a fantastic job. There are times when there are disagreements with the states or with larger companies versus smaller companies, and that's okay. I mean, not agreeing on everything is okay. And I think at least the culture I walked into and get to partner with you and others is it's okay when there isn't an agreement on every single issue. And you can walk away knowing that you just don't agree on that particular topic. There's a way to be disagreeable. Also, though, I think, you know, the consensus building on some of those major topics, and you mentioned one that I know is close to the heart and pocketbook of every single trucking company, and that's lawsuit abuse. And at the state level and the national level, that's become one of those consensus building issues. So talk a little bit about that problem. You know, I wouldn't, you know, some would say, you know, plaintiffs' attorneys are bad. I think that's an unfair characterization. We're not here to defend or critique, you know, that industry, if you will. But certainly our industry and our members have been made targets, and many times unfair targets, to generate revenue. And that's the kind of thing when you see staged accidents in different states, and there's almost a mill of how it works. And so the justice system is there just for that. to determine justice. And so talk about that topic, where we are, and then what are some of the things we can do? I see a sign behind you that I know you're going to use. So
you like that? You like my little advertisement?
It's good. Yeah, good marketing.
Mark, you're absolutely right. And hey, you say the trial lawyers are bad. I don't think they're bad. I think there's definitely a use for them. I think, their motivation is a lot different than ours. The motivation of the trial lawyers is to drive up those costs so you get a better judgment. On the defense side, it's usually about cost containment. What does that mean? That means that there is a much greater incentive for the plaintiff's bar to go out there and to get the training and do the research and focus group mock juries to see if they have a case that is going to hit a huge payday. We don't have that on our side. That is as broad as the trial lawyers do. They have an academy of truck accident attorneys that sole focus is going out, educating trial attorneys on how to be successful when they sue trucking companies. Of course, the reptile theory, we've all heard about that, and that's kind of where the Mongoose method came in. As you can see right back here, but behind me, they use a cobra to advertise the reptile theory. What's the reptile theory? The reality is the reptile theory is a script where they're able to walk witnesses for trucking companies into a place during a deposition where they're going to make the facts look bad. So the Mongoose method is about countering what they're doing with the reptile theory. And, the trial lawyers will tell you, well, this is the science that we're using to make sure that the juror is going to send a message to that company and the industry that we cannot have unsafe activities going on and we are protecting the community. They're saying it's about going to the reptile brain. For us, it's about making sure our folks know what they're walking into. It's really taken a page out of the book of the plaintiff's bar, which is extremely brilliant in how they have been able to go after our industry and put themselves out there as the saviors of justice. And really, unfortunately, they have tilted that scale of justice to a point where it's abusive in a lot of cases, so much so that a lot of folks see this, not as a place, the court system, not as a place for them to go and get fairly compensated for their damages, but it is this jackpot justice mentality that unfortunately is in the minds of a lot of folks that ultimately drives up insurance costs, and it drives up costs for everybody. It hurts the smaller guys a lot more than it hurts the bigger guys. So what we're doing with the Mongoose method is we are training our members in the trucking industry about how to be better when unfortunately they are in an accident. We're doing it before it happens. So they know that there are tools and resources out there for them to be prepared when the worst thing in the world happens, where their truck's in an accident and somebody has lost limb or life. That's the last thing that we want to see as an industry. If we're at fault, we are going to be the first ones to say, hey, we're at fault. We want to make sure that those people are compensated for whatever we caused. But we need to make sure that we are getting true justice. And it's not about, you can see my scales there. It's not tilted one way or the other. It's a balance. It's about ensuring that we do have that balanced system. And that's something that I am very passionate about advocating for. And we have been very blessed. I have so many of my colleagues in states where they have been able to get legislation against lawsuit abuse in Texas, in West Virginia, in Montana, in Missouri. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that here in the Silver State yet. So I'm taking another approach, and that is through training our people to be better when they're faced with these kind of lawsuits.
And Paul, you don't know my background, but I'm a physical therapist by trade. So I didn't grow up in the trucking industry. And so getting into it, I didn't realize even that there were lawyers that are specialized in semi-truck accidents and in the trucking industry. And my wife's watching The Bachelor, and there's a commercial of Brad Bradshaw. If you're in a semi-truck accident, call him. And I was watching The Bachelor too, but it was mainly my wife, I swear. Yes, did you create the Mongoose method, or is that Is that Nevada
So the
trucking or?
Mongoose method, the branding is my idea, but I was inspired through going to a meeting at the American Trucking Associations, our legal forum that it takes place in July. Last year it was in Washington, D.C. And Mark Manera, I was doing everything I could to get out of going to this meeting. I was making every excuse, from hotel to plane to try to get out of it. None of it worked. Everything just ended up falling into place. And so I'm sitting in this meeting and I'm watching a neurocognitive behavioral scientist, not a lawyer, a doctor like you, right? But a brain doctor who is walking through what they do in the reptile theory and talking about the training that they do. And I said, all right, we need to do this. Not when our folks are facing these insane lawsuits, but we need to do this beforehand. Every single company has their corporate witness, their corporate representative. How do we get better? We get better by practicing, right? And it's much better to practice, not when you're in the big game, but practice before you get there and before you have, millions of dollars on the line, maybe the viability of your company moving forward. So that was really, kind of my idea, my thought. So we retained Dr. Kanaski. Very blessed that my colleagues from around the country, Louisiana, Iowa, Indiana, Nebraska, South Dakota, have all done Mongoose method trainings in those states. So we're seeing this kind of take off throughout the country. We're going to have one in May right here in the biggest little city, Reno, Nevada. So, hey, if anybody wants to come and gamble in Reno, Mark, I'd love to host them. I'll give them a Nevada Trucking Association a discount on that. But we're doing that here and I'm really excited about it. It's all about how can we make our companies, our members better when they're dealing with these kind of lawsuits.
Well, it's and Paul, for those of you, Mark Manera, he's a mad scientist. I mean, he could lecture on diesel fuel, on neuroscience, on all these different topics. When I've been in meetings, and he's brilliant. You really should teach some classes at the college level. I mean, or at the master's level. I mean, you really should. But one of the things that I have, even early on, and just being new with fresh eyes to the industry, was realizing one of our greatest challenges in this industry, and we've talked about it a lot on Merging Lanes, is perception. And that perception is driven by some facts that can be changed and that are changing. The way drivers are compensated, the way they're treated, the routes they run, the way they live a healthy lifestyle, the diversity within the industry. Some of those are perceptions. Some of those were facts that needed to change and evolve, and they are. But much of that negative perception is driven by millions and millions and millions of dollars of advertising that runs all day long, 7 days a week, on cable and network television and on billboards and on digital media and on 100% of any plaintiff's attorney's website. And social media. And, we couldn't spend dollar for dollar, even if we had the money, probably couldn't spend dollar for dollar in a way that's going to compete with the perception of the big, bad, angry trucks that people don't like. So, one of the things, just like Paul's strategy with the Mongoose method, many times people want to run to the legislature or run to the policy arena. And many times the challenges that we're facing in these debates are not legislative or not policy driven. They're either politically driven or, in this case, data scientific driven. And in this one, I would call it marketing. And because, there's been such a concerted effort to dehumanize our industry and to objectify our industry and make it about the big trucks, when they deliver 86% of everything in Alabama, 78% of everything in America, but
5% in Nevada.
Yeah. And so without them, but who's driving the trucks? Truckers. And so one of the things we're doing in Alabama, I know Paul's doing, is to humanize the industry, to tell those stories of the men and women who work, in every sector of our industry, that live in your backyard, that make sure, that during the pandemic, when the store shelves were empty, you got your stuff. You didn't pick up the phone and call your plaintiff's attorney during the pandemic. You called your doctor and, the trucking industry. You didn't have to call them. They just did their jobs. And so, that is the kind of thing. And again, if there is something to be, in the justice system that needs to be adjudicated, there is a system for that. And that is what it's for. But like that, those are the kind of things that get Paul's energy up, get mine. is because we have wonderful stories to tell. We have important jobs to do. And when stuff like that distracts us and gets in the way, and our members get in the way of what they do every day, when it's not about safety, when it's not about justice, those are the things we have to fight for. And so, Paul, it's a tremendous movement you started there. You know, one of the things before we wrap up, I really just, you mentioned the last 2 years we've seen a lot of change. We can kind of see into the future, at least a few years. What are the things in the next 5 years, maybe stretch it out to 7, that you think are going to be the major things that the industry and companies themselves are really going to be facing?
Well, I think it's going to be, you know, a transition, you know, or potential transition from the type of fuels that we use today. I think we still have a lot of work to do on that, but, you know, I have 2 of my truck dealer members, they're putting in electric charging stations, one up here in Northern Nevada, one down in Las Vegas. You know, I think there's still a lot of challenges out there. You know, I love the idea of electric vehicles, especially at $5 for a gallon of diesel fuel right now, at least here in the West. I don't know what you're paying in Alabama, but here in Nevada, Northern Nevada, $5.
Almost, yeah,
almost 5.
Yeah, $1,000 to fill up a truck.
Yeah, it's definitely not cheap. The labor shortage, you know, how do we address that labor shortage? You know, it's interesting. I had people call me saying, hey, tell me about the truck driver shortage. I mean, what is it doing to you guys? And it's like, oh, well, we've had a truck driver shortage for as long as I've been here. You know, that's definitely been an issue. You know, you listen to some economists, you know, from MIT testify in front of Congress. We don't have a truck driver shortage. We just need to give every trucker 18 more minutes a day and they'll be fine. Without a real world understanding of, no, all the freight isn't coming from and going to the same place. And, you know, with that 18 minutes, you're not dealing with things like weather and detention time and truck parking. So, I mean, it's kind of a silly math equation that somebody did that has no basis in reality. You know, I think, Mark, that's our job is, you know, we're dealing with, you know, supply chain crisis. We're dealing with labor issues. When we're dealing with sustainability and what the new type of fuel is going to be, is to bring it to the real world practical realities of where we're at. So, you know, somebody isn't just popping off with one of those silly sound bites, you know, that they like to put there on the 6 o'clock news and say, well, no, let's talk about the transition to electric vehicles. Let's talk about the mineral supply chain challenges that we have today. We have 1.5 lithium mines in the United States of America right now, both right here in Nevada. We need more nickel. We need, which the world demand of nickel, read an article a few months ago, it's going to exceed the supply. The demand of nickel is going to I'm screwing this up.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Exceed the supply by 2025.
The seed is what we did down here in the South a long time ago. Moving on.
I'm trying. Cadmium, cobalt. A lot of those things are being controlled by not our best friends, you know, in terms of geopolitical issues. So, you know, copper, the amount of copper that we are going to need to move that power, you know, we're going to need 3 to 5 times more power lines than we have today. So those are all some of those practical challenges and realities we need to think about. My old man was a gold miner. I grew up in the mining industry. I worked in mines in college. So, you know, I have that kind of real world understanding of just what it takes to get an ounce of gold out of the ground. And in Nevada, you're looking at, over 2 tons of earth being moved to get 1 ounce of gold. When you think about all of the minerals that it's going to take to change our mobility from fossil fuel to EV, we have a tremendous challenge. And I don't think it's something that is going to stop it, but we need to be aware and cognizant of what some of those realities are and not put ourselves in a place where we're going to be dependent on people that we don't like. We've seen that with oil, you know, over our entire lifetimes. And I don't think we really want to do that with all of those other minerals that we're going to need to make that transition.
Well, let's say, like I told you, mad scientist.
Yeah, I could listen to you all day.
Yeah. just got in the mineral business. But well, Paul, Dr. Manera and I are just excited to have you on. We could probably talk for 2 hours on any one of these topics, but for those, and then Mark, you bring us home, but for those out there who want to learn more about you and your organization, where can they go find more info?
For me, okay, they can go to the nevadatrucking.com. You can go to mongoosemethod.com. Hey, love to have you. We only allow members of state trucking associations to go to these Mongoose Method trainings. So you need to be a member of a state, an STA before you go. But hey, love to have you. Mark, thank you so much. It means the world to me to be invited to come on here with you. You are absolutely one of our bright spots in the Federation. Love what you're doing in Alabama. And hey, you are absolutely that future leader that I am really excited about coming into this industry and moving forward, the trucking industry and definitely our Federation. So thank you, Mark.
Thanks for being on. Dr. Manera, any closing comments?
Paul, thank you so much for coming on. I have to say, I do have to say that I personally think from a marketing standpoint, the Mongoose Method steps on reptilian, whatever that was called. I don't even know. See, the Mongoose Method's in my head. So I love it. I appreciate you coming on and taking some time out of your day. And thank you everyone for listening.
Well, hey, thank you, gentlemen. Have a great day.
All right, we'll sit.
It's more than just a living, y'all. Hell, it's our way of life. We're the last of the cowboys, the giddy up gone boys. 18 wheels on the concrete, it's a slow and dying breed. Rolling like Jesse James, a modern day outlaw game. If you're out here riding with me, come on back and make some noise. We're the last of the cowboys.